Good morning, and welcome to a bonus episode. So today, I'm going to respond. It wasn't so much a question as a comment, a discussion that I had with Chris McFall. Thank you, Chris, for bringing this to my attention. He had some questions dealing with the title of one of my studies last week about the Antichrist. And Chris was absolutely right. I thought I would share some of what we talked about and maybe just a little bit extra investigation that I've been able to do. So the discussion revolved around the use of the term Antichrist to refer to what Jesus calls the abomination that brings desecration. The fact of the matter is, in the New Testament, the word Antichrist only occurs 5 times. And it's all in the mouth of John, specifically in 1 John. And when John talks about the Antichrist, he's very, very specific in what he says. Chris was simply saying that he had done this study and came to the conclusion that many times we conflate 2 figures. Now, what John says about the Antichrist, first of all, he defines who the Antichrist is. In 1 John chapter 2, verse 22, he says, "Who is a liar? Anyone who says that Jesus is not the Christ. Anyone who denies the Father and the Son is an Antichrist," one who stands in opposition to Christ. Now, this defines very clearly who the Antichrist is. He later says something very similar in 2 John, verse 7. John writes, "I say this because many deceivers have gone out into the world. They deny that Jesus Christ came in a real body. Such a person is a deceiver and an antichrist." Again, he defines who the Antichrist is. It's one who stands in opposition to Christ, either saying he's not the Messiah or he didn't actually come in a physical body. Back in 1 John chapter 4, verse 3, he says, if someone claims to be a prophet and doesn't acknowledge the truth about Jesus, that person is not from God. Such a person has the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard is coming into the world, and indeed is already here. There, John says the Antichrist has already come in his time, which was still in the 1st century. And yet, the Antichrist was still coming. How can that be? Well, John chapter 2, verse 18, "Dear children, the last hour is here. You've heard that the Antichrist is coming, and already many such Antichrists have appeared." What John says about the Antichrist is that there are many Antichrists. It's not just one figure. It's anyone who stands opposed to Christ, saying he's not the Messiah or he didn't come in a real fleshly body. They deny either his divinity or they deny his humanity. John says about the Antichrist, he's already been here and he is still coming. So was Nero the Antichrist? Yes. According to John, he was. Was Hitler the Antichrist? Yes. He denied the deity of Christ, and on and on. Anyone who denies the deity or the humanity of Christ is an antichrist. Now that figure is different from the figure that Jesus talks about in Mark chapter 13 specifically. What do we do about the Antichrist? Well, John says, 1 John chapter 4, verse 1, dear friends, don't believe everyone who claims to speak by the Spirit. You must test them to see if the Spirit they have comes from God. There are many false prophets in the world. First of all, we're to test the antichrists. And then as John says in 2 John, verse 10, if anyone comes to your meeting and does not teach the truth about Christ, don't invite that person into your home or give any kind of encouragement. We're to oppose them. If a person presents himself as an antichrist, if he denies the divinity or the humanity of Jesus, we are to oppose them. Now, Jesus also talks about the abomination that brings desecration, that brings blasphemy to the temple. He does that in Mark chapter 13, but there he talks specifically in verse 6, many will come in my name claiming I'm the Messiah, and they'll deceive many. Then again, in verse 22, false messiahs and false prophets will rise up and perform signs and wonders so as to deceive, if possible, even God's chosen ones. Now, the interesting thing is that John does talk in the book of Revelation about something similar to this, but he doesn't use the name Antichrist in the book of Revelation. Not here, not at all. In Revelation chapter 12, he talks about the great dragon who comes to oppose the woman and the woman's child, and he snatches the woman's child, but the child is snatched back from the dragon. In chapter 12, verse 9, he says, this great dragon, this ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, the one deceiving the whole world, was thrown down to the earth with all his angels. The dragon is identified as Satan, the deceiver. His primary function is to deceive. In chapter 13, John then talks about not one but two beasts. The first beast arises from the sea. The first beast comes out of the sea, and it attempts to deceive people. It's given great authority. It speaks blasphemies against God. It wages war against God's holy people. And then in verse 11, there is a beast that comes up out of the earth. This beast, in verse 14, with all the miracles he was allowed to perform on behalf of the first beast, he deceived all the people who belong to this world. It seems that this second beast may be what Jesus was talking about in the abomination that causes desolation. The second beast makes a statue of the first beast. The statue gains life and speaks to everyone. There are signs and wonders, just as Jesus prophesied in Mark 13. There is deception, and it's this second beast that at the very end of the chapter, we're given his number, which is 666. It appears that God's people endure persecution from the first and the second beast. Chapter 13, verse 10 ends by saying, "This means that God's holy people must endure persecution faithfully and remain faithful." What do we do when we see the Antichrist? We oppose him. What do we do when we see the abomination that causes desolation? What do we do when we see the beasts? What do we do when we see the false messiahs and the false prophets? We run. And John tells us we'll not be able to escape. We will endure persecution. Endure patiently and endure to the end. Thanks, Chris, for the comment, for the question. I had fun looking up what John said about the Antichrist, and then what Jesus and John both said about these figures that come later.